Hello, good morning, and welcome to Sunrise Daily today. I'm Chamberlain Uso.
Good morning and welcome. I'm Ayo Makinde.
Well, lots of people still waiting to see when will this ASU and federal government negotiations, when will they agree on the terms such that students can get back to school. And time and again, these negotiations have gone back and forth in terms of what do we expect. Now, I think one of the bone of contention is such that ASU wants UTAS as one of those conditions that they need to fulfill for them to get back to school. But the federal government on their own part, remember, when the president presented the budget, has said that if you're not on IPIS,
you're not getting paid.
So it appears, who knows if they can make headway on that particular one. So there's so many who are just waiting to see, because, I mean, if you look through some of those details, ASU, I think the FG had offered to pay the salary arrears and the 30 billion naira earned allowances of university lecturers through the same scenario, IPIS. And, well, that happens to be one sore point where they just wonder, how will this end?
Well, ASU, the federal government is offering to pay 40 billion in all, 30 at the first instance, and then spread the rest over time. But, you know, the position of ASU has remained consistently that, look, nowhere in the world does anything like IPIS operate, you know, in universities. So as far as they're concerned, it's not even something to give a thought to. That's on the one hand. And they're also saying, look, okay, if you want an option, we'll give you an option. The option is UTAS. And all relevant presentations have been made to the Minister of Labor and Employment, to the Ministry of Finance, Accountant General's Office in particular, and also to the Senate President's Office. And I think part of the people that the ASU also made the presentation to included NIDDA, which is the agency of government that is supposed to verify whether or not that particular thing is good enough to go as far as that is concerned. How far that will go, I think one waits to see, because if, as at yesterday, the ASU president is still saying it's the federal government that is stalling the conversations, I'm wondering how far really. We lost an opportunity, Chamberlain. We had so many months of the lockdown to have conducted all kinds of hearing virtually, at least just to get things going. At the time when the federal government is saying, let's open up the universities, let's open back all the schools and get back to our lives, we're still talking about this. I don't know.
Well, it's something that, you know, at the end of the day, you're hoping that, look, how and when will all this be sorted? Because you can't imagine the impact this will have on those who are supposed to be in school.
You said something, and it kept ringing in my head, you know, earlier in the week, that we know what someone will do by what the person has done before.
Yeah.
Federal government over the years has not really taken the issue of university education as seriously as they ought. Why? Because they quote, or the term brain drain got to a head in the 80s in this country, where universities, ASU was on strike for way too long, and the federal government seems to like say, you know what, that's your thing. Before you know what is happening, everyone who had a brain that was still functioning just decided to leave the country. That's why we have so many Nigerians doing fantastically well in various parts of the world. What you're saying, the implication of us not getting it right now, is the same. It could just happen. Some people already, you know, many people are just waiting for the next opportunity to get out of the country. And if we lose our best brains, who is going to build the nation?
And that's the part that, you know, one of the many parts that we need to address. And that principle of, you know, you could tell what people do by just look at what they've done before. I mean, in military, you hear them say, look, humans are creatures of habit. So security people look at some of those things in order to tell what may likely happen. In football, you see managers, they just look at how this team has played. What formation have they played previously? It's okay, if this is how they played, all right, so we expect this, and this. And then they plan based on that.
Some mental algorithm, you would say.
So it's the principle is everywhere,
honestly,
you know, for people to see that. All right, let's go ahead right into the dailies and see what they reflect today. We'll start with Vanguard today. Look at the lead story on the front page of Vanguard newspaper this morning. Knocks as presidency faults amnesty on Lekki shootings. CSOs hit government over rejection of Amnesty International report. Presidency rejects Amnesty International's report on Lekki shooting, says body doesn't run Nigeria. Not that much was said yesterday, so you heard it on the program as well. Says group lacks all the facts, doesn't know beyond what it is told. Soldiers fired blank bullets at Lekki protesters, says ex-army spokesman. You want to say something on that one?
I mean, unless those shells we saw are as empty as they say, I don't know what. Maybe because I've not seen a bullet before, so I don't know what it looks like. I don't know what a blank looks like, or a rubber bullet. But by the way, those sounded quite metallic to me.
Well, you know, they always say that, look, the procedures that needed to have been followed in when the military is deployed, you know, and then, yeah, they're supposed to be called in aid to civil authority. That's what the law requires. And then the instructions, they normally, you know, in form of signals. And these days, they tell us that signals can be a lot faster than it used to be before. And if officers don't get signals, they don't move. You know, that's why we're asking Mr. Additional yesterday, look, some of those things. Because look, there are clear procedures that have to be followed.
There are always rules of engagement, especially when contending with unarmed people, such as protesters and all of that. Well, there are also things that will definitely not be popular opinion when we talk about the rules of engagement as far as the police or security operatives are concerned. But then there are certain basics that perhaps, you know, if people knew, you know, about those things, as such as this one that we're talking about now, maybe, you know, our responses would have been a little better.
Yeah, but you know,
the responsibility of security agencies to protect lives and property at that point.
But you know, popular opinion is one thing. The rules are the rules. Because if the images circulating didn't show any police presence on the ground, so it assumes that the military got there. So, and then if the military got there without the police, then they have to assume the policing function.
Absolutely.
So if they are going to assume that policing function, it means that they're supposed to have held their ground. The military is trained to shoot to kill.
That's it.
So if they don't assume that policing function, so there are just so many questions concerning some of these things. And then, well, if you're calling blanks, you know, yeah, they're the ones to use, but they're not supposed to kill. They can't kill, they injure. You know,
with all of the allegations of fatalities that we are getting, were they really blanks?
That's why they're talking about soldiers fired blanks. So soldiers were there. So remember the big question.
But no,
who gave the order?
But that question there, but what the first things we were hearing were, you know, soldiers didn't shoot. Now we're hearing soldiers fired blanks. Okay, what else are we going to hear?
Time will tell. And part of what they were asking yesterday, if Mr. Additional says the presidency will have to wait until all of these panels are over and done with. So does that mean that they're going to wait until 6 months? If the panel's time or terms of reference is 6 months? What happens in the meantime? Well,
it's a long one.
You have several other stories making the front page here today. We are still counting number of policemen killed, says DIG Southeast. Then Nigeria is speaking up on Nigeria will engage stakeholders to ensure Okonjo-Iweala leads WTO from FG. Lagosians panic over absence of policemen on roads. Yeah, you see that right there. So, Mr. Mississippi. Well. Okay, I'll let you read that. Quite interesting. It's got to do with some looting on bags of rice and things like that. But quickly flip to the back page, if you will. Nigeria versus Sierra Leone. Osimhen returns as Raw rolls out list. So, that's the big one. That's Vanguard this morning.
The Nigerian Tribune is, of course, talking about what we began the conversation with this morning. Eyepiece. Some profs paid 8,000 naira in some months. this is what the issues are, really. Professors, 8,000 naira a month. Well, the writer there is meeting with FG ends in deadlock again. One of the things that I remember the ASU president saying is that some lecturers have been on the same payroll for 11 years, unchanged. And those are some of the issues that they are still looking to the federal government to address. Amnesty International report on Lekki shootings misleading, as ascribed to the presidency. Of course, I think it was from the conversation we had yesterday. Under the picture you see there of a resident of Washington State who was robbed of valuables, inspecting some of the items that were returned. 21 dead, a school bus truck collide in Enugu. Saw this very chilling headline earlier and it's really disturbing. Bandits kill 16 in Katsina. Hoodlums kill police inspector in Ebonyi. Can't even bring myself to say the rest of it. Please check the details of this story on page 4. It's very, very disturbing. WTO, Konjo-Iweala positive despite obstacle from US. That story continues on page 5. And I don't know if you say this is hopeful. FG targets 30 million consumers as mass metering begins.
Yeah, we've talked about mass metering for years, so I don't know what they mean by mass metering begins. Does it begin every year? Or time and again? Oh, boy.
Anyway, this is the
mass metering, yet many still don't have this.
Well,
are they not part of the masses?
30 million consumers are as mass metering begins. Should be spark hope. Chief Dele Momodu yesterday was saying that we should give people hope. So maybe this is it, right?
We'll see. We'll hope. Abi, that's what you want? All right. That's all you want. Hope. Hope is good. But remember, hope deferred makes the heart sick.
All right, the Nigerian Tribune. Osimhen returns for Sierra Leone. Sosigwe gets first call-up. Find the details on the back page of the Nigerian Tribune today. I go for Messi, says Lampard. What that is about is on the back page of the Nigerian Tribune.
Look at Daily Trust next. Lekki shootings, untold story of survivors. How we were shot, victims. Lasuth confirms treating gunshot wounds. We did not kill anyone. Army. Activists. False Lagos government and soldiers claims. Remember the Vanguard had an account, or they have an account where they say soldiers fire blank bullets at Lekki protester, says ex-army spokesman. And then you've got this one says, we did not kill anyone, ascribed to the army. While all the inquiries are still ongoing. So you wonder where all of this will be in light, in context of all the hearings that are going on. Who knows? Well, that is Daily Trust this morning.
The Guardian newspaper, banks in panic, update of servers. Current cyber laws can't help financial system. Find out who said that. Ministers admit government agencies exposed. Experts want FG to scale up cybersecurity architecture. Call for personnel training, more awareness. That story continues on page 6. I think a few days ago I was hearing some people making panic withdrawals from their accounts just in case of anything. Well, that's what you have right there. I have had questions on my mind really about cybersecurity, especially in Nigeria. Increasingly, we are going digital, we are going virtual. Yet, it would seem like many of the things that should secure that space, we're still finding we're still lagging largely, and I think it's about time we really sped up activity in that regard, especially when we're talking about digital economy. Really is a lot. Under the picture there, Nigerians seek end to killings as Muslims mark Eid al-Maulud. That story continues on page 6. The editorial of the Guardian newspaper is on page 12. End SARS when Buhari's silence wasn't golden. That's right there. And a number of other stories you'll find on the front page and, of course, the back page of the Guardian. That's it this morning.
Yeah, take a look at News Direct next. You talked about digital economy. But look at this lead. How NCC boosted FG's revenue by 344.71 billion naira in 5 years. Dambata. That's huge, isn't it?
That's NCC is the Nigerian Communications Commission. It deals with the telcos. And of course, ISPs.
Telcos deal with us.
And telcos deal with us. I think you put it quite right.
No, I said telcos deal with us. You said deal. You emphasized deal.
Well,
I only said
you said
deal
it,
with us.
so, I mean...
No, I didn't say it the way you said it. So there are two different things there. So, but if you look at how... Maybe, who knows, if there's some sort of mention about what... Do they do those KPIs anymore for telcos?
Yeah, the KPIs are constant and consistent. The QoS is a major aspect of the KPIs.
The drop calls that feature and all of those things that were consistent at some point, and many just couldn't deal with it.
The quality of, if you go to the NCC, I mean, I've done that a few times. If you go to the website of the NCC, you will find their ratings based on so many parameters, including especially the quality of service to QoS. And that's how come they are able to rate, okay, this is the number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5, and on and on and on like that. Then there are also ISPs that operate within certain areas, and some are national, some are regional, some are statewide, and all of that. So those things are there. I think those are the cumulative revenue that...
Because I hear a lot of people talk about the fact that, look, when they get some data services, before you say Jack Robinson, it's gone. And they wonder, sometimes, did they throttle some of these things these days? Because you just wonder, it doesn't appear as though it's the same thing. And you wonder, look, why? What's going on? But
I think that people need to get some education on that, because sometimes, indeed, some networks, it will seem like the thing just fizzles out like that, and then others seem to take it easy.
And then the big consumer question, consumer service, customer service. So, well, you might as well just go ahead there and see that for yourselves. And when this kind of stories, Nigeria records highest power transmission of 5,459.50 megawatts. That's still our highest, 5,000 in that region.
And I think, was it yesterday or the day before yesterday, we saw that headline which says that we're pushing something like 13,000 megawatts. Well,
how do you reconcile all of these things? Well, that's our News Direct today.
The Daily Times newspaper, FG begins distribution of free meters, targets 30 million consumers nationwide. That story is on page 5. So you see, told you.
Which is on a strategy.
All right, under the picture you see there.
But sorry, pardon me. But yes, it's good to see that these things they're embarking on these things. But at that time too, many were asking, these were some of the conditions that they were supposed to have followed preceding the increase in tariff. So if they had done it afterwards, wouldn't it have saved a lot of hue and cry?
Question you want to ask is, to whom was the directive by NERC directed? To the federal government?
Discos.
Or to the discos? Now, the discos, of course, aren't the ones doing this. It's the federal government, according to this headline. Or maybe when we dig in, we might see more details. Federal government is the one distributing free meters to 30 million consumers nationwide. Now, what are the conditions? What are the parameters are we using to select these? Those are the other questions that you want to also ask. And then, is this a condition precedent to another increment? Where is the federal government going to recoup the money invested in this from? If there are free meters to people who are the beneficiaries, so many questions, but then
and you can't take that away from the question of paying for what you get, getting rid of estimated billing, the laws that the National Assembly were talking about, that it would be criminal to charge based on estimation, because people need to pay for exactly what they consume,
Absolutely.
the services they consume. Is there any charter, any service agreement such that if you don't provide me what you're supposed to provide, I don't only bear the brunt, you have a responsibility as well as providers? And what about all that called about appropriate pricing?
Service-based tariffs.
So
many questions, really. But then at least let's hope this is some major progress being made here. It's a target of 30 million consumers. Maybe not necessarily 30 million meters, but I guess the details are right there on the inside pages. Protest. End SARS by impact of protests on investment is unquantifiable. We want to find out who made that allusion on page 4. Accident, FRSC confirms death of 21 in Old Enugu Kigwe road crash. That story is on page 5. WTO job. Federal government steps up push for Koje Wela as WTO's DG. Find that story on page 2. The editorial of the Daily Times newspaper this morning is on COVID-19 protocols in Nigeria. Continues on page 3.
All right, take a look at Leadership Friday. Idil Malud, governors, GNI, ACF, rally youths for peace. Buni calls for forgiveness and tolerance. We must eschew religious, tribal differences. Bala Muhammad. Protest, looting, arson, alien to Prophet Muhammad's teachings. Abdul Razak. Let's shun actions that are inimical to Nigeria's growth. JNI. And then they have that story as well. FG begins distribution of free meters to 30 million electricity consumers today. So you might want to go right there and take a look at what steps or conditions that may need to be fulfilled if you're supposed to benefit from this one. So that's you have several other stories making the front pages this morning, but that is it with a look at some of the dailies here today. So we will be back in a moment. Stay with us. Welcome back. We've got Mr. Segun Odubela, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, joining us this morning. Good morning, and thank you for joining us today on the program. Well, taking a look at all that's going on, sure, you keeping tabs as well on all of those things, but you equally get to hear what different authorities or those who are saddled with those responsibilities say. But when you listen to all of those, I mean, that's a shorter version of many respondents who spoke about what they were doing. What stuck out for you, just watching and listening to them?
Well, good morning, Chamberlain. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for having me. I think I want to say that if you look at the totality of it, particularly what that had been happening in the past few days, you will find out that there are two angles to it. First of all, I think the looting is very condemnable, because you will find out that sometimes they even carried away those things that they don't even need, that are not for their immediate use. And you find out that definitely this is a crime that are being committed. But on the other hand, it shows clearly that the level of the poverty, how people are suffering in our country. So for me, when you look at it from both sides, I think it's a sign for our government to rise up that there is danger in the country. Because if you look at the level at which the people are doing it, you find out that, in fact, they don't even mind, they don't even care about even security agencies anymore, because they believe that they have been pushed to the wall. They don't have food to eat. And they find out that most of these things are kept in warehouses. So I think whichever way or the side you are looking at it, I think it shows clearly that our government needs to rise up. They need to quickly look for things, strategize as to the best way that they can curb all these things that are happening. So for me, I think it's a wake-up call for our government. I think it has long been overdue for them to really appreciate how people are actually suffering in the country.
Well, that's one way to look at it, Mr. Dubela. Well, some other people might be wondering, is this a way of justifying what Mr. Additional yesterday called the greed and criminality of the people who are looting?
Yes, that was my first point, that for me, it's also, if you look at it from that angle, it's a crime. Because you can't just go to somebody's property, whether it belongs to government or it belongs to private, and you begin to loot. You even find out that some of those things that are being carted away are not even what you immediately need. For instance, now, was this in Kogi, that I saw that people were even carrying away building materials. What are you going to do with building materials? They don't belong to you. Or you are saying that they are also palliatives. So I think if you look at it from that angle, it's totally condemnable that people will go and start looting without even respect to other people's rights, because some of those things that were being looted they don't belong to government. They belong to individuals who have labored to have those things in place. So how do you justify that?
Well, Mr. Dubela, let's also look at it from one angle. A number of people who have, been involved in this act, some of them are of the opinion that these are things that were supposed to be distributed to them. The COVID-19, COVID palliatives donated by COVID to governments at various states, and they've been stored up for quite a while. So, but then that's on the one hand. But let's look at the fact that, okay, some private organizations came together to donate to government and all of that. Do you think these kinds of actions and these revelations from people who perform this act could in any way dissuade other corporate organizations from being helpful?
Well, thank you, Ayo. You see, again, I think I will also look at that scenario from two angles. First of all, I think it's very wrong for the government to even keep those things in warehouses beyond reasonable time. You see, you can see that from how people have been reacting, that there is a serious poverty in our land. People hardly even find to eat one meal a day. So when you know that this is the situation, I don't think there's any need other than to immediately plan for distribution of such palliatives. I don't see a situation, since you already know that these things are being put together and are being gathered for distributions. I think the government or whosoever are involved needs to know even ahead, as those things are coming in, you're already planning for distribution, so that you don't wait till the whole thing are available before you say you are distributing. There are ways you can plan ahead. So if you look at it from that angle, the people are right to say that, look, we are suffering. People put these things together even beyond government. Then why should he keep them in the warehouse? And the purpose for which they are put together are not being realized. People are suffering. So if you look at it from that angle, you will agree with those people that they felt that, look, this is another way that they see our government. Because a lot of them say our government that they are very selfish. They don't care about their welfare. So they now feel that because you've kept this thing out of them for long, when people that put them together have already done their own part, then why should they remain in the warehouse? So if you look at from that angle, you can then say the people are, you can justify them, particularly those that relate to food. But again, if you look at it from the other angle, that people too need to also exercise some patience. Because again, I know that these things also involves a lot of planning, so that you can plan well, so that it can go round and at least the objectives can be met, which is just for palliatives for as many people as the palliatives can reach.
But then it will sound like you are not even sympathetic with the opinion or position of the governors who say, look, we were already in the process of distributing these things. You know, they just received them. They were just beginning to put action to the works to make sure that these things go round. You don't think that is satisfactory enough?
Even assuming without even considering, then you need to enlighten people. The information must come to the public. You see, you can't sit as a government and say that this is your plans, that you are still doing A, you are doing B. No, then let the people know that you have received this, or you are making provisions for this and that the distributions will start from so time, so that people have the knowledge, people have the information, people know that yes, these things are not kept here for just deliberate denial. So people know that yes, there are plans that are being put together for distribution. But if people don't have the information, they can just assume that, well, maybe government are not ready to distribute this, or that they even want to share among themselves. So you find out that if information is key, our government must learn to enlighten the people, particularly of their plans. Because I know that if people are aware that these things are in warehouse, and that maybe you want to start from local government by local government, or you want to start by from wards to wards, then bring out the timetable, put it in the public domain, let them know that these are your plans that you have. But when they see that these things are kept there, and people, information run fast. So for me, I'm sure some people are the one that have provided information to the people and say, look, the food, these kind of things are here in this White House. And of course, if they don't have a prior information that yes, government has informed us that this and that are there, but that distributions will take place or from so time, then people, patients are run out.
Is there any indication to you that, we take the world poverty clock, Nigeria's position on that world poverty clock in terms of over 100 million people, 105 million people. Look at that right there. Does it appear to you that we actually take those data published by different global bodies seriously?
Well, I think whether we take it seriously or not, even among ourselves, Chamberlain, we should know that over half, if not almost 3/4 of Nigerians are really suffering. You don't need to even say you are waiting for data. Even the experience in the last few days show clearly in all parts of Nigeria. Look at the rate. What is happening in Lagos is what exactly is happening in Ogun, is what is happening in Abuja, is what is happening in everywhere, whether north, east, south, and west. So it shows clearly that the rate of poverty in our country is very high, is very alarming. And that is why I believe that the government should always look for ways to actually alleviate and look for ways to reduce this level of poverty. It's very key. And what had happened is a sign that our government needs to really take this very serious and
Do,
let
do,
people know your.
yeah, I was going to ask you, do you see or think that, I mean, having said that they need to take it seriously, are they really internalizing some of these things, saying, look, looking at all of these images that we've seen here, it's time to go back and have perhaps a fresh think, re-strategize in terms of all that we say we've been doing, whether or not they are making or achieving the necessary impact? Because if that happens again, who knows?
I think that is what we need to do. I know governments have tried or are trying, because I can see that there are quite some numbers of plans that they have been applying, they have been putting in place. But Chamberlain, for me, it shows clearly that we need to go back to the drawing board. Because for me, it shows that all these plans that we have been talking about or we have been doing are not reaching the people, or they are not reaching enough populace. You can have maybe all these SMS, all these plans to giving people's trading money and all that kind of things. But we need to ensure that we even put things in place to even get the information, feedback from the people. But looking at the events in the past few days, I think that our government needs to go back to the drawing board. It shows that these plans that they have put in place, that they have been running over the years, are not actually reaching enough people. Because if the population of those who are in that poverty level are high, then that means that your plan should be the one that will surely go to quite a number of people. Not that you will say that, for instance, I will say that maybe there are about 140 million Nigerians who is in that category. And all the things that we've been doing all this time will only reach about 5 million. Then that means there's a problem.
Well, Mr. Rubella, perhaps, yeah, pardon me, perhaps one of the challenges we have had over the years is that of continuity of certain good policies or not. Let's go down memory lane for a bit. I remember that in the government of General Obasanjo in the 70s, I think around 77, 78, he came up with what they call Operation Feed the Nation. It was an agricultural program. Now, that evolved, if we can use that term, into Green Revolution when the Second Republic began. When that government was terminated in 1983, that program ended. When in 1985, another government came on, they came on with something completely different, D-Free and Better Life program. And when that government ended in 1993 or thereabout, that program also ended. It was only when Chief Obasanjo came back as president again that another attempt was made to revamp the agricultural sector. And even that has been kind of topsy-turvy. Now, we have had a problem of sustaining one policy beyond certain regimes, certain governments over time. Do you think that's a problem of continuity of well-intentioned, public-spirited policies? Or is it okay for every government to just come in, end what one government has done and start its own?
Ayo, it can't be okay. That's exactly what the government needs to do. You see, I think that once a policy that we are seeing that are actually working and helping our people, I think there's a need for the National Assembly to ensure that that policy is put in a place that there are laws that will support that policy, so that a new government, whether same party or a different party, does not need to come and then put that aside and begin his own policy. That is a major problem that we are facing. And then, if you look at Lagos State as an example, you will find out that that is one of the things that is taking place. That is one of the things that is even bringing development in Lagos. Because if you look at it, even though it's the same party, you still have the issues that this is a policy of the last administrations, and this is the one before the. It cannot. We cannot move ahead like that. If there is a need, we should make laws that will make that government to continue with that policy. Once we all agree that this is a policy that is helping and bringing development in the state or in the country, then there could be continuity.
Yeah. We put up a poll some time ago when Nigeria was 60, asking Nigerians to tell us, what they want to see, how would they like things to turn out. And many voted at the time that they would like to see the clause referendum included in our constitution. They voted overwhelmingly for that. And so it does appear, that's it on the screen at the moment. So you have been close to government, in fact, in government. Give us a benefit of hindsight. What happens? Because many have this impression that when people get in government, they kind of get disconnected from the people in terms of what the people really want and whether or not the information or what they want gets to the authorities, because sometimes it appears as though their policies or their actions are cross purposes with what the people really want. What happens in that regard? Do you even see them taking up this clause or this that the people voted for to take it up and do something about it?
Well, I thank you, Chamberlain. You see, let's even take it from the state level experience that I have. I think the first problem we have is with our members of the House of Assembly, the representatives of the people. I think first of all, our House of Assembly members need to go back home regularly. They must have town hall meetings regularly. They must know what the people want. It is only when you know what your people want, then that you can go back to the state and ensure that those things they want are put in place. But because our people don't even go home, the so-called representatives, they don't go back to their constituencies to listen to what people want in the areas of interest, what will bring development, what will give people confidence in government, what will make sure that people participate in government. So I think that is the first thing to do. We must go back to our people. We must listen to our people. It is easy to say that we are representative of the people. Are you listening to those people? Not only even to listen. Are you taking what you've taken note? Are you taking it back to the assembly for you to ensure that you put them in action? So I think because our officials, government officials, have lost a contact with our people. That is the first major problem that we have.
Let me add this as well. In some other climes, for things as little as when they go late for parliamentary meetings, maybe everybody's waiting for them, they resign. But in this case, nobody has ever mentioned any such thing, and you ask yourself, whoa, we must be in another world here. So how come that appears to be strange? Because if they say they're 70 people, and all of that happened, heads haven't rolled, nobody resigns, business as usual, it appears.
I agree with you, Chamberlain. You see, and that is the standard that we should plan to get to or to achieve. With respect to our lawmakers, let me give you an example, which also even extend to the executive. You see, we see pictures in social medias, in papers, where even when proceedings are going on, a lot of our legislators are sleeping. So, and our people too are also looking at that. But when it is time for another election, people still I don't know, people don't even mind. They still vote for the same people who are not representing them well. So, but in the last event of 2 weeks, 2 weeks or 3 weeks, I can see that things will change going forward. I can see that people are now taking interest, particularly our youth. They are now taking interest in what is actually happening in the country. And I think this is a very good omen for us. It's very good because it shows clearly that their voices will now be heard going forward.
Okay, well, because I think that's it.
You never know before now.
Pardon me, Mr. Dubel. I think that's a good point to put this question in. Now, a number of people have seen just what you are saying. It's a good omen and all of that. And the youths are kind of fired up now. Now, the system of government we have adopted is a democracy. We have to vote. We have to be voted for. Do you see the youths, getting into the political space to take on positions of power? And if so, how do you see them doing that, given whatever challenges or limitations they may have?
You say, Ayo, if you look at the events of the last few days or last few weeks, if youth can come out and say, this is our party, and that this is the person or the set of people we want to vote for, and if they can go around and mobilize, I know finance may be a problem as we used to think, but going forward, I think with what I saw and I read in the past few weeks, I think our youth can actually form their political parties and then give even PDP or APC a run for their money. So for me, it all depends on determinations. And I can see that our youths are now determined. If they can carry that forward, I think they can achieve that. And I think it is time that we even leave this governance to our youths. Because a lot of those who are leaders now, look at their age, their age, or you find out that they are already they are old, that they should be looking at retirement, and that we should allow our youth. They know. I'm convinced now, because before I will confess that I think that our youth are not really determined, and that is why they are being used by the politicians, by the older politicians. But from what I've seen in the past few days or weeks, I can see if they carry that further, I'm telling you, their voices will be heard, and
in fact,
they will be part of the government. Yes.
The time will come, and perhaps now is when politicians will find it very difficult to divide Nigerians based on ethnicity, religion, or all of those issues. They will see them for who they are. If you were elected to perform certain functions, do what you have said you will do. And so, who knows? I guess we'll just keep watching that space. And besides, it's a democracy, so all are welcome to ensure that things happen. So we'll be keeping tabs on INEC as well, and the National Assembly, above all else, because that Electoral Act, they need to do something to improve how people vote. So we'll thank you for coming on this morning, Mr. Segun Odubela, Senior Advocate of Nigeria.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right, we're back in a moment, still on similar subject matter. Stay with us.
We've consulted and we're now expanding the terms of reference of the panel that we set up on Monday, because it's exactly the same kind of composition. And so that same panel, headed by retired Justice Doris Okuobi, will be investigating, all of the issues that happened at the Toll Plaza on Tuesday night. So their terms of reference have been expanded, and for emphasis, the sitting will start on Monday at the Lagos Court of Arbitration International Center, at the Lagos Court of Arbitration International Center, which is in Lekki. It's I think it's around the first or the second roundabout in Lekki. They will be starting sitting, and receiving petitions, from Monday. But of course, if you need to send them petition via email, their email address again is judicialpanel@lagostate.gov.ng. These emails have been populated, their telephone numbers too have been sent out. So they will start their sitting on Monday. So we will expect, everyone, that have, a petition, a case, or something, to pass on to this panel. And like you said, they've been empowered extensively to determine how they run and how, they conduct themselves at the panel.
So to discuss the legality of the framework, the setting up of those panels, and all the objective they set out to achieve, we've got two gentlemen joining us today. Mr. Bondo Bani is a former second vice president of the NBA. Thank you for coming on this morning.
Yeah, thank you, my brother.
And we also do have Mr. Victor Gewa, who is a legal practitioner joining us in our studios in Abuja. Well, let's start with you here. Well, much as many look forward to ensuring that all of these ills are addressed above all else. But then nobody would like to see putting something on nothing, as you say in law. But having seen the way this is going, how it was set up, some concerns that people have asking, wait a minute, having set up this now, are they actually sure that the panels in states can take certain steps that the federal government are supposed to be looking into? What do you think of that?
Thank you for having me. I want us to know that these particular panels all over the Federation was as a result of a resolution of the National Economic Council, in which almost all the governors, I think all the governors are members of that council, so they passed a resolution after the incident, the protest. Go back to your various states. There are complaints. We may not want to do it in a centralized form. This is a federal structure now in, working. Go and take all those complaints because they know the enormity of the complaints.
Federal structure, the NEC meeting.
They took that decision at the NEC meeting, and then now, instructed all the governors to go to their various states of the Federation in order to set up these panels that will now hear those complaints that people have against the issue of brutalization of the Nigerian police force. And so when you do that, and I think that most of the report also will get back to the federal government, but those ones that can be implemented by the state, the governors will do it. It can be like a judgment of the court. If the governor accepts the panel recommendation, he will forward it to the registrar of the court, who will register that particular acceptance, as judgment of the court, which becomes enforceable. So those ones the state can enforce, they go ahead and do it. The one they cannot, of course, the recommendation will be made to the federal government. That, I think, is what is clearly at play in this regard.
If it was a federal function at that time, the NEC, and it's supposed to be federal responsibility, and they're talking about a federal agency being SARS, so can states come up with those resolutions on behalf of the federal government to execute?
As I said earlier, it is actually federal structure that is working. I don't think anyone can go to court in order to challenge what is actually being played out. There are so many complaints against the Nigerian police, and we know that the states have been doing a lot in terms of even funding the Nigerian police force, in terms of buying vehicles and even kits and boots and materials. They've been doing that. So in the regard of what has happened, the federal government realized the enormity of these complaints all over the Federation, and that the best way they can tackle it is not to over-centralize these panels, but let's have them by the various states. Let them get to know the complaint that people are putting up that led to these young men coming to the street and staying for almost 3 weeks.
We'll still come to that and take experiences of people about what happened and how to move forward. But let's equally get the opening comments of Mr. Victor Gewa on this matter. What do you think of the procedure?
Well, thank you, Chamberlain. Good morning. Good morning to my senior colleagues there, Mr. Bani Monday. First of all, I want to say that the idea of setting up of the judicial panel of inquiry by the various states is a palliative measure, what I would call the normal palliatives that the government have given to us, which we have seen that some of them are now in warehouses that have now been looted. With due respect to what my colleague said, the Tribunal of Inquiry cannot, with due respect, look at those subject matter as were enumerated by the governor and the Attorney General of Lagos State. And to be very candid with you, the various Tribunal of Inquiry set up by the various governors of the state is very, 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 incompetent to look at the subject matter. The subject matter. And what is the subject matter? The subject matter, like Mr. Monde said, is police brutality. Police brutality is not an offense per se. There is no offense called police brutality. It is simple human rights violation. Simple human rights violation. And the Tribunal of Inquiry laws of various states, if you look at that of Lagos State, for example, section 1 of that, of the laws, of the Tribunal of Inquiry laws of Lagos State says that this tribunal shall have power to inquire into the actions of public officers of the state. Public officers of the state, public officers of the local government councils, area councils, and even the obas, the traditional councils. So police brutality is an act committed by the Nigerian police force. The Nigerian police force is created under section 214 of the Constitution, and in the second schedule, part 1 of the exclusive legislative list, the Nigerian police force and other security agencies are contained in item 45 of the exclusive legislative list. So the state Tribunal of Inquiry, which is set up by the laws of the state, cannot competently look at the action of a federal agency. Because in the first place, the police is a product of a federal law. So, the only thing the inquiry can do, and the Attorney General of the state was very smart when he was introducing some item, and he said the actions that took place on the 20th of October 2010 in Lekki. So that, if you want to look at what happened, maybe who brought in Fashola's camcorder, you can start looking at, the Tribunal of Inquiry can start asking questions of how come the Fashola's camcorder that was seen at the Lekki toll gate got there. But it cannot look at the issue of police brutality, and as a matter of fact, it cannot even competently look at the actions of those persons, the protesters at Lekki, because the law is that they should investigate and inquire into actions of public officer of a state. So all the Tribunal of Inquiry of the state are not competent to look at police brutality because the Nigerian police force is in the exclusive legislative list of the Constitution, and the National Executive Council, as referenced to by Mr. Monde, my colleagues there, cannot give consent to an illegality. It is a constitutional matter. You cannot give jurisdiction by consent. He knows what I'm saying. So that it was done by a resolution from the Federal Executive Council or the National Economic Council. I mean, we are talking about National Economic Council. That alone itself cannot even pass a resolution to look at the brutality as complained by the NSAS.
Okay.
So we don't want. It is not a competent body to look at police brutality. And
all right, let's.
There is no gainsaying about that. So,
okay, we'll bring it back to you.
Mr. Monde himself knows that.
Okay, let's bring it back to him. So, well, what do you think of it?
Yes, I've listened to him carefully. What is the argument? As I said earlier, what happened in Nigeria was clearly unprecedented, where the Nigerian youth trooped to the streets and they were complaining of police brutality and the issue of extrajudicial killing. The government responded by changing the name of SARS, and the people were still unsatisfied. And the protest continued. Government now said, what do? We need to respond also to the demands of these ones, the young ones. And they've been talking about brutalization of the Nigerian police force, over time, and which has been ignored.
Which is a human rights violation.
Which is a human rights violation. So what do? Now, the federal government, as I stated earlier, it was at the Economic Council that decision was taken, that the governors were also participants. I want a situation where we decentralize the issue of getting these complaints, because over-centralization is what some of us have been complaining about. We should operate a proper federal structure in which we can get things domiciled in various federating units. Now, this complaint, if you centralize it, we may not be able, probably in 2 or 3 years' time, we may not be able to get all the, complainants, being here.
Yeah.
Now, go to your various, let me finish now, my brother Chamberlain. Go to your various states. Get to hear this complaint through your tribunals of inquiry, which you are going to set up in accordance with your extant laws. Then, the ones you can implement them. If you are talking about Nigerian police force, there will be recommendation as to prosecution or compensation or whatever. Let it also be reported to the federal government, because this is clearly their exclusive jurisdiction. Issue of police he was talking about. But there are ones that the state can. Of course, in the case of Lagos State Governor, he even put down 200 million naira by way of seed capital in case of compensation. He did it. And there is nothing wrong if at the end of the day, part of the money is given to those who actually have been brutalized and then compensation awarded, which all along has not been. Will any person refuse the money? I'm coming now. Will any person refuse the money and say, oh, no, because it didn't come from the federal government? For God's sake, we're looking at interests of justice now.
That's the question that I want to ask you.
Yes.
Are you saying that these panels set up by the various state governments are actually federal judicial panels that they set up on behalf of that the governor set up on behalf of the federal government?
No, the issue of subject is the issue of Nigerian police force. Nigerian police force is something that is clearly exclusive to the federal government. And so it is said that the state cannot have a jurisdiction. But we have over time seen where the states have been involved, even in funding Nigerian police force. Yeah, and nobody has come up with the issue, it is something that is exclusive. We see them buy vehicles. I'm coming. We see them buy vehicles.
The legality and authority that the states have over whatever the decisions and recommendations that are made, that I think is the subject matter.
But it's implementation that actually will determine the legality. If after the recommendation by the panel, and then the governors of the various states now send these recommendations to the federal government for implementation. I don't see anything wrong with that, for God's sake.
Okay, but
I'm looking at it from the perspective of over-centralization will create more bottleneck. Can we now decentralize this issue of getting these complaints here by the various states so that we can now recommend to the federal government, who have exclusive jurisdiction over issue of police now, for implementation? I don't see anything fundamentally wrong with that.
We understand that. But the question, that he's put out there, and the questions people want to understand is that, how is it that the states, because clearly, just as he highlighted, under the Tribunal of Inquiry Law of States, that of Lagos, Section 1, it clearly stipulates that the issues that they can look at are issues by state public officials. You have equally rightly said that SARS, defunct SARS, it's a federal institution. So how is it then that they don't have the powers from the law here to look into a federal matter? Then you make a recommendation which you don't have the powers to, and government will implement it. Besides, why can't federal government set up a federal panel to look into these things?
I have given you the locus, from which these particular panels were set up. There was a resolution, I have told you,
that we know,
of a federal, of a federal agency,
under what
National Economic Council, met in the light of what transpired all over the Federation. There was tension all over the Federation. And now sitting down to set a centralized panel to look into this matter because it's SARS. They said, no, let's decentralize it for the purposes of getting all these complaints here, so that you can now make a recommendation. The ones you can implement, go ahead and implement. But the ones you cannot, because of issue of jurisdiction, bring it to the federal government. I personally, in the light of what has happened and the urgency of the matter, do not see anything. This issue of interest of justice, who is actually now,
but the question about this, much as people
because
want
of
justice,
this issue of legality now, who is actually wounded in this particular regard?
But not that people want justice.
Yes.
So what happens tomorrow?
Yes.
If somebody maybe that is accused in this panel comes up and says, well, under the law, you cannot do what you have said you're going to do, there will be lawyers who will take up those cases for those people.
But can I tell you that the panel of inquiry has power to compel any person, including federal government officials, in order to come and give evidence. That panel has a right to regulate these proceedings. Yes.
And including federal SARS for federal function?
Yes, the law allows them to do that. They can invite any person before the panel. They can compel you, and even if you disobey, they can also commit you for contempt. So they have a right to invite any person in the country, wherever you are resident, and you must come to the panel, yes, to answer any question or provide any evidence or any documentary evidence in regard to whatever their proceedings are. So they have a right to regulate their proceedings. So there is nothing wrong if they go ahead in order to look into this matter, in order to ensure that they make a recommendation to the federal government. I don't see anything wrong because nobody is wounded. Nobody is wounded in this regard.
Okay. Mr. Giwa, how do we move forward from this? Because listening to what he said, that doesn't correlate to what your initial premise was.
No, thank you. It's not a matter of initial premise. It's a matter of law. And Mr. Monday knows very well that the president and governors cannot sit down and give jurisdiction to issues of law. And it's not about sentiment. Now, we are more particular about the effects of the panel because it has to do with very important matter. And let me talk about solution. Let me talk about, and I'm still wondering why Mr. Monday has not looked at the real issue. The issue of police brutality is very key in the end-SARS protest. Police brutality is a serious violation of the human rights of the Nigerian citizens, the Nigerian young people, Nigerian youth, including old and young. So there is a panel that is created to handle issues of violation of human rights. Mr. Ubani knows very well. I even believe he knows what I'm saying. And that is the National Human Rights Commission. Section 5 and Section 6 of the Act. Section 5 says that the National Human Rights Commission shall have power to look at human rights violation as guaranteed by the Constitution and other conventions, such as the International Convention on the Civil and Political Rights, International Convention on Social and Economic Rights, African Charter on Women's and People's Rights. And Section 6 of that act says that the Commission shall have the power to investigate violation of human rights committed by any persons and any agency, and we have the power to determine compensation and damages for any such violation. Now, there is National Human Rights Headquarters in Abuja. There are various human rights commissions in the various states of the Federation. Just like you have INEC headquarters in Abuja and INEC.
Mr. Giwa, what we're going to do is we'll go to break, but we'll come back to you to continue your train of thought. Stay with us. Welcome back. So, Mr. Giwa, could you go ahead and continue your train of thought?
Okay, so like I was saying, and Chamberlain and Mr. Monday, we also understand that. Can the Lagos State panel of inquiry invite the head of IGP monitoring unit, who takes direct instruction from the IG? Ordinary courts, you will see what is happening in various states, so various states where commissioner of police don't take instructions, don't take instructions from the governors. So not to talk about a panel of people which they know clearly that is not under their jurisdiction. So the truth of the matter is that the only organization, the only body that has the power to look at police brutality, I want us to look at the subject matter. I'm not saying there's illegality in the panel. I'm talking about illegality in the subject of police brutality, which is a violation of the human rights of Nigerians. And I'm saying that it is only the National Human Rights Commission under Section 6 that is expressly stated as amended that has the power to look into human rights violation and determine compensation and damages for victims of human rights violation. And like I said earlier, National Human Rights Commission has offices in, at least to the best of my knowledge, in most of these states. And so we should not compromise institutions. We should not undermine institutions. That is why it is set up. And this is the right time for us to see them do their job. But in Nigeria, we don't respect institutions. Things are done at the whims and caprices of people in power. And that is why we are having problems we are having problems with where we are right now. And that is what the NSAS protest is talking about. Where there are institutions that are saddled with the responsibility of meting out punishment for the deserving officers, those institutions should be empowered to do so. We should not sacrifice it on the altar of convenience. So you cannot say that the panel will look at it and now take some.
Just one moment, Mr. Giwa. The Human Rights Commission has been on since like 1995, so I mean, one can recognize how far back that goes. Now, you also know that the Human Rights Commission was there when Chief Obasanjo, at the beginning of the Fourth Republic, set up the Oputa panel, which, by the way, I mean, if you would also recall that a case went as far as the Supreme Court, where certain dignitaries refused to appear before the panel. The case went all the way to the Supreme Court, and this was the Supreme Court that judged that only states and not the federal government can institute panels such as this. Consequently, the NEC had to go ahead and make that pronouncement that we are seeing today. So the federal government is aware that the NHRC is there. But the Human Rights Commission has also complained about some of these things that are being raised, and nothing has been done. It's not the first time that the Human Rights Commission has taken cases against the Human Rights Commission, human rights cases against the police, against SARS and all of that, and nothing has been done. So what could be wrong with this one, given the ruling of the Supreme Court on the matter?
Okay, thank you very much. It's very simple, Makinde. You have asked a very brilliant point, and the answer is very straightforward. What was in context in that case was the Oputa panel. The competence of the setting up of Oputa panel by the president. And the argument and the decision of the Supreme Court was that, if I'm correct, with reference to the case you mentioned, was that it is only the state government that can competently set up a tribunal of inquiry. It is not within the federal government. Now, what I am saying is that the National Human Rights Commission, right now, even before then, like 1995, 2005, after 2005, the National Human Rights Commission never had the power to enforce its awards. But after a lot of complaints by various stakeholders, they now have the National Human Rights Commission Act as amended. That now makes the decision of the National Human Rights Commission to be as that of an high court. So it has force of law. So the new National Human Rights Commission Act as amended has been empowered by the National Assembly to give it the tools to implement, to have a force of law. So there's a difference between the Oputa panel set up by the then government of President Judicial Obasanjo than the agency created by law. So the question was that panel couldn't have been set up by and by the president, except it comes through national legislation. And in terms of tribunal of inquiry, it is within the state. Now, what the tribunal of inquiry can do, they can inquire into acts, actions, violations that are within the laws of the state. For example, if there is a murder and the murder is done by what people call them in Lagos, these guys that take care of the traffic in Lagos, LASMA, the tribunal of inquiry can look at the murder. It can look at when somebody commits an act of murder, because murder under the criminal code is within the purview of the states. So the tribunal of inquiry, as it is constituted, can look at issue of breaking down of buildings in Lagos State, can look at arson done by officers of Lagos State. It can look at destruction of property of Lagos State. It cannot look at the destruction of Central Bank, for example, because Central Bank is an agency of the federal government. So it is not a matter of whether the National Human Rights Commission has been existing. It's the fact that it is only that agency, for now, as provided by the statute. I am not speculating. Section 6, Section 5, and Section 6 are very clear about the competence and the power of the National Human Rights Commission, and it is so clear, and it goes without saying.
All right, Mr. Giwa,
I must say,
we hear you,
that the federal government has empowered the National Human Rights Commission.
Okay, so what we will do is let's look at sundry issues as well. Just hang on, we'll come back to you. Now, yes, those issues, I mean, we'll have both of you on that subject matter. But then, the acts, the actions, all of those things, those are the things that we want corrected.
Yeah.
Now, so it's those who, I mean, as lawyers, you go to court based on some of these cases on a regular basis. So in context of some of those particular decisions, whichever case each of you may have gone through, are you confident that at the end of the day, that all of those issues that had happened before and may still be happening will become history moving forward?
Well, looking at sincerity of the government is very key. All the governors have taken up that responsibility of setting these panels, with so much fanfare. And I believe that they must also be very sincere in ensuring that there is full implementation. What drew these young ones into the street was accumulation of grievances over time, and without corresponding intent on the part of people they complain to address those issues. It's redress that was not in any way put into context by those in leadership that made this thing to grow over time, that got to a boiling point. So they must be sincere. I have looked at the composition of the panel, in Lagos specifically. There are 4 or 5 members that I know, and these are people of integrity, and I know they will be very sincere enough to make correct recommendation that I feel should be implemented, especially on the issue of violation of people's rights, which over time nothing has happened. On issue, you saw the young man that came to give evidence, the first witness. He told you that he got judgment against Nigerian police over 5 years. Up to now, there has not been any payment whatsoever. I have a similar. I will also appear before the panel. I got judgment against Nigerian police. There is no appeal up till now. I have done everything humanly possible through the judicial process in order for the Nigerian police to pay the amount of money for my client that was shot when he was coming back from work. A little bit of argument, they shot him. He had to use his money to go to India. After treatment, we came back, and then we now started the case in court. The police never came. We got judgment up to 5 years now. We have not been able to enforce. Central Bank has been hiding the account of Nigerian police. We wrote to the Attorney General of the Federation. They acknowledged up to now they didn't do anything because the Sheriff and Civil Process Act says you must get the consent of the Attorney General before you can execute against any of the agencies of government. So we cannot continue this way. We cannot continue to operate where there is no obedience to court orders or laws. We don't even obey our laws. So this is what I think that this panel will begin to correct. That if I get a judgment against any other Nigerian police or army, it should be enforceable. That is one of the recommendations we expect. And I'm sure they are going to make those recommendations to the federal government. So we begin to, that's why I said that this argument as to whether they have jurisdiction and all that, let's not engage in television to correctness of this legal jurisprudence. That can be done in court. But I think that the proper thing is that what is the intent? The intent is to ensure that people who have been brutalized, get properly, get proper redress. And if they get proper redress, for God's sake, what is the issue of this? As I said earlier, the states are the one even funding the police in most of the instances. They're the one buying all the things and all that. So why can't they?
If they are legal, if they are legal, if there are loopholes there, we'll have to.
Well, what I'm saying, it cannot be established on television. Let's go to court. Let's go to court. I have my position, and I know I can be able to canvass it also.
Sorry, before we go to.
No, just a minute. Let him get his own case as well. And we will come back to him on that one. So, Mr. Gewa, so do you see this getting addressed as well? Because, several cases of rights abuses across board. So beyond that of SARS, defunct SARS, I might add, do you see that making an impact moving forward?
Yes, Chamberlain, let me look at let me open a page on this matter, and talking about issue of police brutality, like Manu Bani just said, my colleague there. But you see, we need to look at issues with the mindset of solution. We should not apply temporary solutions to permanent problems, and that is why we are where we are right now. I want to bring a very important, episode to you, and to see what we are talking about in terms of respecting institutions and police brutality. And that takes me to a case of a very young man like I am. One VJ Eldred Opwoma from Bayelsa State. VJ Eldred Opwoma is a gubernatorial candidate in Bayelsa State, and sometimes within this year he placed his petition in the election tribunal, which was of Bayelsa State Election Tribunal that was holding here in Abuja. And it was on the 15th of August 2020, the tribunal was ready to deliver its judgment. And guess what happened? Talking about institution, why we must respect institution and not promote individualism. This young man was coming with his wife to the tribunal as a petitioner to hear what will be the decision of the tribunal in its own matter. And guess what happened? Members of the Inspector General of Police Monitoring Squad took a swap at him, arrested him on the 15th of August 2020 for an allegation which they claim was made by one Benson Agadaga, who is one politician somewhere in Bayelsa State. They took him from that date, after the matter embarrassed his wife, that is, harassed him, tortured him, did all kind of things to him within the court premises, and he was arrested on the allegation that somebody has made a petition against him. And what was the petition, Chamberlain? That he recorded somebody's voice. There is no offense as recording somebody's voice. He was taken on the 15th of August. 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, 5 days thereafter, the police did not give exactly why he was arrested. Now, the point I'm trying to make here is that it is a holistic thing. It is not the issue of NSAS. So that is why I'm emphasizing on the point of institutions. We should allow the institutions to handle their matters. We should embolden the institution. We should embolden EFCC. We should embolden ICPC. We should embolden the National Human Rights Commission. And let this agency work. The tribunal will come and have a lifespan and go. But when institutions are in place, we will be able to get to a position. Now, when this guy was arrested, and why was he arrested? He was arrested because his petition in the tribunal he was contesting the fact that the current deputy governor of Bayelsa State has issue of certificate forgery, challenging under section 139 subsection E of the Electoral Act, saying that he has been able to make statements contained in affidavit of a fundamental nature that facilitated his credentials to contest the election. And the police, instead of allowing this man to hear what the court was going to say, arrested him detained him illegally without any warrant of arrest. Even when their lawyer went to court to get a court in order that Justice Taiwo said on this, that this young man should be produced to court on the 2nd of September, the police refused to obey that order. They did not produce him on the 2nd of September. The judge, Justice Taiwo, made another order that he should be produced on the 7th of September. The police did not bring him to court on the 7th of September. The court had to make a final decision on the 10th of September. That is when it was finally reduced based on the judgment of the court. What is the point I'm saying? The point I'm saying is that we must be able to allow institutions of the state to perform their functions, and the institution should have the internal mechanism to discipline its own. And when they fail, public outcry, like we have seen and we are going to see, should be made to them, and they should be made to correct their activities, such that we will not be applying temporal measures to permanent solutions.
We hear you on that one.
Right
But
now,
let's also bring it. Let's bring this back to Mr. Ubani as we wrap this up now. One of the issues that a number of people who are aware will be looking at is, of course, we've been talking about the legality, we've been talking about the process, but then there is that Supreme Court ruling that says only states have the right to come up with certain panels of inquiry, such as this one. Mm-hmm. Now, does that ruling of the Supreme Court, does it undermine or whatever to the commission, the National Human Rights Commission?
I don't think so. The states still have a responsibility, to do things, that happen within their state. What happened, as I said earlier, recently was clearly unprecedented. The governor of Lagos State himself, was the first person, to be fair to him, that came into the fray, joined the youth, he spoke to them. At the same time, ran to the federal government, with the recommendation, with whatever the keys were actually demanding. I said, look, it's what they are, saying, pass it over to the federal government. Came back again, stayed with the young ones even during the protest, showing level of concern because it's about security. If there is any breakdown of law and order in the state, the entire state will be, engulfed in fight. So the man did all he could, then which led to this issue of NEC meeting, and that NEC, there was a resolution, go to your various state. Let's listen to the young ones, what they are even complaining about, which is actually what led to this inquiry, panel of inquiry being set all over the country. To me, the most important thing is the intent. What is the intent? Is to really assuage and make sure that recommendations are made and corrections made. We must make permanent correction to what has happened. Over time, we neglect these issues. And I cannot blame the state now for taking these proactive measures they are all taking in order to redress this issue of getting people to talk about what has been penning them over time. He's been penning them, and it's been bottled up. Now it's spilled over. Now people are now trying to redress it, and somebody is now talking about legality and all that. For God's sake, there are times when
your lawyers. What do lawyers talk about?
What I'm saying, we cannot establish that over a television. That can be done in a court of law.
No, but you can make the point on television.
For me, what is being done is clearly something I applaud, and this is one of the reasons also why you brought me here. Is also remember that I also made a promise that those that broke into the warehouses all over because of hunger, because those things were supposed to be given to them, but the governors erred by holding them, and there was no explanation as to why the reason these things were being held. And these guys now discovered during this process that they needed these things which were never distributed to them in the first place, and took them. Now you arrested them and are now keeping them in detention. Most of them have not been charged. They have not been granted administrative bail. There was a woman that I heard yesterday was going to go and buy things.
To represent them.
I'm going to represent them. I have offered free legal services to those that went to those warehouses to collect those things because they were hungry. Because the governors themselves supposed to be the one to be charged and arraigned for holding those things that were supposed to be.
What about those who stole people's property?
No, those ones cannot, they require legal representation, but not pro bono. Now, because they did something that is fundamentally wrong, we must make a distinction between hunger.
How will you prove that they were hungry?
Of course, when you see a hungry man, you know. You see, this guy.
Well, I cannot establish that. I can't establish the legality of the hungry man on TV. Mr. Give us your concluding thoughts as we go on.
Well, I'm very surprised at what my senior colleague is saying. I'm very, very surprised. But I know why he's saying what he's saying. And let us not miss the point. The point I'm making is the fact that, yes, there needs to be an urgent action to address the issues of police brutality. I was part of the NSAS project. We are conversing that those issues should be addressed. But what I am saying is that we should not allow. Even the governors, have the governors not even used, the same governors, have they not used the same agencies of security agency to oppress the people? We have just been told now by the Nigerian army that it was the governor of Lagos State that even invited them to do what they did. So who is going to probe the governor? How are you going to hold the governor accountable? Most of these states, it's happened in Kogi State. We have seen where the state governors also deploy the agency of the police against their people. We are seeing in Port Harcourt today a lot of atrocities done by the police. My point is that those actions must be investigated, but it must be investigated by the proper authority so that there will be no issue as to talk about the implementation of the recommendation made by any of those agencies. That is the point I'm making. I don't want somebody that will any action that will look to be a decoy. That is done just to pacify the youth. We don't want to be pacified. What we want is we want really solution to those injustices. And the government and the federal government knows they have all it takes to address this issue of police brutality. They know when to handle it. In short, we can have even the commissioner of police setting up panels within their states to investigate some of these things. It will be done publicly. The National Bar Association will be involved. People will go to their various states when it is set up by the federal agencies, and those issues will be done. We want live coverage of those issues. It is not when you come through one other tribunal that we will come and be discussing some of these things. So that is why we want institutions to be empowered so that their decision can can enthrone justice. That is the point we are making. The truth is that all those panels of inquiry should be disbanded. I mean, for the purpose of the police brutality, it is not within their power to look at the police brutality. The relevant agencies should do that. Our youth should not be deceived by those parts. The panel of inquiry can look at what happened in other issues. But on police brutality, we have enough agency to look at it and make sure that compensation is made, make sure that damages are done. Federal government can set up a tax fund, distribute it the way they did to COVID. Yaya Bello said 2 billion was sent to each governors of the state for the purpose of COVID-19. The presidency should also send money to each state for the purpose of compensation of victims. We don't have to wait for Lagos State. The presidency should bring out money. The action of the police is an action of the federal agency. Distribute the money to the various governors. Let the Human Rights Commission and the various agency, civil society organization look at this point, address the issue, and ensure that it is enforced. That is the proper way to go. We don't want anything to deceive us. We want justice, and nobody can tell me that the Tribunal for Inquiry has the power to look at police brutality. That will not be correct. That will amount to a decoy.
I don't think it was 2 billion that the governor said, actually, but we do get your point. So let's get your concluding thoughts as well.
So my take is that life will never be the same again. It's important that government take any complaint at any point in time serious. Let them not allow those things to accumulate, because that is actually what led to what has happened presently. Anytime there is complaint or issue of grievance by citizens, we want these proactive measures, by state and federal. If you address those issues, we begin to have a country that all of us shall be proud of. Then secondly, on this issue of arrest, the mass arrest that is going on, they should apply humanness in dealing with these people. There are most people that are innocent that have been picked now, and they are being kept in detention, no administrative bail, and you have not charged them to court. So it is important we do not go back again to issue of NSAS. There is this level of wickedness in governance that made people to go out to the street. Don't, in the process of mass arrest now, and then intimidate and be doing more things that will make them to be angry and frustrated. Those that are innocent should be allowed to go home. Those that are culpable, charge them to court timelessly. Don't keep them in indefinite detention. It is not the right thing to do.
Okay, Mr. Mondo Bani, former second vice president of the NBA, as well as Mr. Victor Giwa, a legal practitioner. Gentlemen, thank you both for talking to us today. on the program. But let's see, we should have Olawale Agbede, who is an editor and that's of Inside Mainland. He's also an NSAS advocate. Do we have him ready for us now? Well, haven't listened to all. Oh dear, lost him again. Okay, well, might as well just go ahead and take a look at some of the emails that we do have from you all. Oh, let's see, we have so many of them now, so almost saying spoiled for choice. But let's see if we could start with that of Olorunyi Goke. He says, 2 most important factors in leadership anywhere in the world is transparency and trust. These 2 basic factors are lacking in our governments at all levels in Nigeria. Hence, the reason for the mass looting of Kakovid warehouses. That's coming from Goke.
Yes, this one's from Kola, says, good morning. My concerns are about implementation of our federal structures. Why can't we allow local authorities to function optimally and allow the best of our intelligent people to lead our local government and also reduce the number of our states and federal legislature in various houses, 1 per state and 1 per local government respectively?
Well, check this one from Kingsley. He says, the panel cannot delve into criminal allegations against police officers. They do not have such powers. Besides, being a federal body, the allegation against the police are crimes which only a court is empowered to do.
And this next one says, you can't be a judge in your case. The various state governments that are setting up these panels of inquiry are centrally controlled by the federal government. I think we need a neutral body to look into cases of police brutality and mostly the Lekki massacre.
Well, I've got this one from Barrister Victor, who says, not the Victor that was watching, that was with us just now. He says, well, no, I think it comes from NHRC Nigeria. No, it's not.
Barrister Victor. Okay,
no, I think it says Barrister Victor is absolutely right.
Okay.
That on the NHRC to hold the judicial panels, I believe it will hold more legal authority than the states formed panels. Let's stop setting up panels that are bound to fail. This is what brought us here in the first place. So, wow, there you go. So many of them. But I see another one. I think we still have a little more time. I see this one coming from Foremenka. Yep. He says, the panel cannot delve into criminal allegations against the police. Okay, I think we looked at that before, did we? Okay, so they're just trickling. But it's always interesting to hear and listen to some of these matters. Look, it's a democracy. Ideas have got to contend. We need to listen to people, but superior ones have got to take the day, as they say in democracy, which is a game of numbers. Well, it was you that was saying, even if those numbers are not right. Well, on the basis of the new numbers, they will be right on that premise. So that's what democracy says.
Well, it's very interesting what we have to do. Well, as we say, majority will have the way, the minority will have their say.
Okay, I think you see that he says, I think I have one from Robinson. Says, I wish I had an opportunity to speak on the current trend of events across Nigeria. Well, now you do, because we're listening to you. He says, I'm surprised that nobody is talking about the docility of the National Orientation Agency at this time. Neither has the moribund agency itself made any comment for failing us these many years. It's high time the president sacked all key officers of that agency and replace them with creative people that can drive nation building. Well, there's always a backstory to NHRC's function. Sometimes we ask them, what's going on? And then they say, look, do you know how much our budget is? We have offices in states. Do you know if they're even funding those states? Why aren't they funding those things? Have you gone to any of the offices? What you see there may shock you. Who is the supervising minister?
That's for the NHRC.
NOA.
The NOA, I mean, even that backstory has a backstory, which is the fact that where did they come from in the first place? It was from MAMSA, in the 80s into the 90s. It was very effective at the time. What did they do then that they can't do now? The issue then is funding. Perhaps then some people might be right in saying maybe government is just paying lip service to some things.
So if they sack the head of NOA today,
and no
does
funding,
it guarantee functioning new DG tomorrow.
That's the thing.
In light of the existing structure.
And funding.
So, well, I think we have to back off from all of these backstories because we're out of time on this one. But we thank you all for watching. Now, what a week it's been. What could we have done without you all out there? Thank you for letting us be a part of your day, your week. We will see you again next week. I'm Chamberlain Osol.
And I'm Ayo Makinde. In all, please be safe. Have a good day.